everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah, and I'm here to introduce our illustrious speaker, David Wermuth. David has been a youth pastor for 11 years, a foster parent for 9, and a therapist for nearly 2 years. He earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from Ottawa University and a Master of Social Work degree from Walden University. Additionally, he enjoys volunteer work, such as leading youth mission trips to Belize, and he served over 500 hours in disaster relief after the Joplin tornado in 2011. Cooking new recipes, spending time with family, and traveling to new places are among the things that David likes to do for fun. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
I have to adjust the mic. I'm a little bit taller up here. Well, good afternoon, everybody. You guys ready for your afternoon naps after lunch? I know I'm like, we should just get cots out, or if you just need to lay down on the chairs and listen, you can do that. Just make yourselves at home and feel comfortable. So, all right, well, I'm super excited about today's topic, which is lessons from a Jedi foster parent. You can hear a big ego there, to create foster home longevity. And so this topic is dear to my heart, and I could probably spend weeks and months talking about fostering and foster parenting and fostering needs, and so we're going to try to condense it in a 2-hour frame. So pray for me that I can actually get done. I am a son of a preacher man, and so let's pray I'm not long-winded and be up here all day. So all right, so before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty things, I want to kind of do a quick little orientation to kind of just preface today's topic. And we're going to kind of go over some different things that I've learned in foster parent trainings and that I've learned as a foster parent, and recommendations as social workers and what you can do to be that support for kids impacted by child welfare systems, or parents or families that are impacted. And so my heart really is to help foster parents and with retention rates and recruiting new foster parents, because the need is high. And so at the very end, I'm going to try to save some time for some Q&A. So if anybody has questions that they want answered, feel free to jot them down or put them in your phone. And at the end, I'd be more than happy to address them. The limitations for today's topic is that I am a foster parent of level B adolescent teen boys. So I don't take in littles. I think the youngest I ever took in was maybe 9 or 10, and it was just for a short time. And then also in the Missouri, I don't know if everyone's familiar with foster care, there's different levels. So there's like traditional level, level A, level B, also known as behavioral level, career level, there's treatment level, there's medical level. And so depending on the population that foster parents want to serve will depend on the training that they go through. And so mine was kind of an elevated level that I went through. So a lot of the stories that I have to share and kind of my approach and what I've gleaned from over the years is based on working with that population. Also, this is not me to bash the system or to bash social workers or agencies or foster parents or foster kids. This is identifying problems and recommending solutions and then taking action, as us good old social workers like to do, being agents of change. So I like to have fun and cut up. So I like to laugh and crack jokes, and so y'all just pardon me. I'm gonna have a party up here by myself if I have to. I got my amen corner right here up in the front, so thank you ladies for cheering me on. I also want to let you guys know that during today's session, there will probably be some emotionally charged conversations. I am going to share some examples and some stories of fostering and what I've experienced, what I've witnessed, what I've observed over the years. And so if at any time you need to step out or take a break, you are more than welcome to do so. And don't be surprised if a fellow social worker checks in on you to make sure you're doing okay. I'm trying to be trauma-informed approach as much as possible. So, also confidentiality. I'm not going to be disclosing any of my previous or current foster kids' names. I'll just say one of my foster sons, and to protect their integrity and dignity. And again, I'm going to try to be sensitive to the time and to the, I got a little clock in the back, so I have that as a cue. Before I start, I just want to do something real quick. If you have ever been a foster parent, or if you're currently a foster parent, will you stand up? I just want to honor you, and I want to respect the service that you gave to our community and to the most vulnerable populations of communities, and that's foster kids. And I want to say thank you for the dedication, the hours, the tears, the care, and that you made a difference. I'm going to get emotionally charged. I'm going to have to take 5 minutes. Hold on. So it's a blessing, and there's very few of us, and we need more of us to foster. And fostering's not for everybody. I used to think it was. I used to think everybody needs to do their time. Be a foster parent for a couple years, or take in this kid or that kid, or find a time in life. And really, over the years, I realized it's just not. And there are many different ways that you can support foster families. And as social workers, I'm confident that there has been many ways that you have helped foster families and kids impacted by child welfare. So, all right. So that kind of leads me to our first slide with the orientation and kind of like what's going on. And so I'm not even a big Star Wars fan, but I'm like, I don't know, I need to have a theme to go with our topic today, so I decided Jedi and Star Wars. So, don't come up to me afterwards giving me Star Wars quotes, because I probably won't know. But I love sci-fi, and I love sci-fi shows, and so I'm like, well, we'll just use this as a theme. And so I'll share a little bit about that here in a second. But am I crazy? This was a question that I often asked myself when I wanted to become a foster parent. Am I crazy? And I know that's not really a politically correct term to be used, and that was a real term I asked myself. And it was often because the people around me said, "Are you crazy?" And it was very convincing. And am I crazy? Do I really want to take? Oh, you don't want to take it. They could say things about you. They could cause you to go to jail. They can lie about you. The risks involved. It's dangerous. They're strangers. And almost like painting these kids as monsters. And I'm like, I was taken back a little bit, and really I had to reevaluate my support system. And who is in my support system, and who is not looking at me like I'm crazy, who's looking at me like, yeah, let's work this out together. Let's see how we can be supportive and how we can help. And so I, as a youth pastor, I had a family in the youth group. The parents of the teens were foster parents with Missouri Alliance. Any Missouri Alliance workers out there? Okay, so I don't have to mind my P's and Q's. No, I could say whatever. No, whatever's said in here stays in here, right? Confidentiality, therapist. No, I'm just joking. So they're a Missouri Alliance foster family, and they were level B, which is a higher level of certification and training and a higher level of kids that they take in their home. They only took in girls. And they come to the youth group, and my heart just felt for them. My heart just broke for them. As a youth pastor, I wanted to help out. How can I pray with you guys? What can we do for Christmas to treat your family, to treat the girls? Because y'all know foster parents don't get paid enough, and most foster parents don't do it for the money. And yes, there are foster parents that do it for the money. But usually those foster parents don't last that long. I was introduced, to this family, and I would hear horror stories and shocking stories, and I'm like, no way would they do that, or, try to burn the house down, or try to trip the foster dad down the stairs. And I'm like, I don't see that. What? And I'm just a little naive to the whole situation. But I started having conversations like, what got you into fostering, and what encouraged you, and how long have you guys been foster parents? And really just having conversations, I began to empathize and try to understand kind of where they come from. And at that time, sadly to say, they were the only Missouri Alliance Level B foster parents in the Joplin area. I was shocked because we know those are not the only level B kids that we have in our area. So what often happens in child welfare, as you guys know, is kids get shipped off to areas and communities that they're not growing up in or that they're not familiar with. And we know anytime that a kid is in the system, there's trauma. That's just a given. Anytime you've been taken out of your home, there's trauma. And so on top of that, being removed from your teachers, your church, your clubs, your sports, your coaches, whoever those supports are, it adds to the stress. So I'm like, well, am I able to be a foster parent? And so I began to talk to him and what does that look like and the training that it's involved. And I did it and I went through it. And really, I would say being a foster parent is one of the proudest things I am of. You know, even more than as a therapist, as a youth pastor, you know, to be responsible for these lives and to do the best I can with helping them. I've cherished the memories, and there's been a lot of bitter memories. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I would do it all over again. And really, being a foster parent has equipped me to be a therapist better than any other experience, because I'm living with these kids. I see these kids. So when kids come into my office, when I have clients that come into the office and I'm hearing their stories, I know how to listen for the underlying trauma and how to address it. I'm also listening for the underlying trauma in the foster parents. So help me listen, help me empathize, help me problem solve, help me with engagement skills, assessment skills, intervention skills. And so really, I'm grateful for those experiences, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without it. So am I crazy? Just a little bit. So, all right. So let's go ahead and I want to do a quick Jedi definition because that's kind of our theme today. So any Star Wars fans out there? Just a few? Okay. Well, hopefully you'll enjoy this. So I was like looking up, I'm like, is there any journal articles on Jedis and the Force and Yoda? And I couldn't find anything. So I did something that most college students do. I Wikipedia'd it. So I got a very reliable, accurate source of information of what the Jedi is in the system. And I want you to listen to this definition of what Jedis are. And I want you to kind of add and take away with the terms Jedi or the Force as foster parents and the system, okay? Jedi are considered warrior monks. The Jedi study and utilize the Force in order to help and protect those in need. The Jedi members, such as Padawans, Knights, Masters, respect all life by defending and protecting those who cannot do it for themselves, striving for peaceful and non-combative solutions to any altercations they encounter, and fighting only in self-defense and for the defense of those they protect. By training their mind and the body, the Jedi seek to improve themselves by gaining unfettered access to the Force while also seeking to improve those individuals and groups they come into contact with. Does that not sound very similar to what foster parents do? And I'll tell you, I have failed many a times as a foster parent. And there's been many a times that I'm like, is this really a calling? Am I really equipped to be a foster parent? So, as also a foster parent, it's very tempting to go to the dark side and to argue and combat and to use the kids' words against them to prove a point, or to challenge the system and to see how the system is broken and doesn't work, and so just to become overly emotional. It's very tempting, even to this day, even as a therapist. So, what is the presenting problem with foster homes? Today's message is really on the foster parents. How are foster parents being trained? How are foster parents being equipped? How are foster parents being supported with ongoing support? I'm a firm believer, and I was sharing this with somebody earlier, with fostering, and especially I used to work at Will's Place with Ozark Center as a child therapist, and I quickly learned that a person-centered approach has very strong limitations when working with children. They're protected. Even under laws, they're protected. And so we're advocates and we're speaking up for them and we're protecting them. And if we see signs, we're asking questions. That's always our priority, right? Is safety, making sure these kids are safe. Often because they're not able to speak up for themselves or they don't have the emotional intelligence or the developmental intelligence to speak up for themselves. So we're often looking to see how are they thriving, how are they doing, and are they safe? And so oftentimes as a foster parent, we struggle too. We struggle with having the words to say. We struggle with working with foster kids and what are their needs and how do we advocate for them. And so not being properly equipped, not having the proper support, we often fail and we often struggle and we often burn out. And so really this topic is how do we provide ongoing support and initial support for foster parents? I'm a firm believer of treat the parent, treat the child. Can I get an amen? I mean, because if all we try to do is focus on that kid who's a minor, who's not developmentally mature, and all we're doing is providing interventions for that child, typically that child is a product of their environment. So that person environment, we're looking at the whole system. We're looking at their teachers, their parents, their birth parents, if they're in a foster home, their adoptive parents. And in any way that we can address and provide interventions to help that child, subsequently that child's being helped. So as social workers, we have to be careful that we don't glorify and only obsess over a person-centered approach when working with children, because we'll totally miss it. And then the child is left suffering, or the child disrupts and has to go from home to home to home, residential home, group home, home, foster home, birth home, foster home. That pattern. Okay. So according to the DSSMO.gov, there is roughly over 20,000 children in Children's Division custody from last year, and those that are also at high risk of being involved with child welfare. And so the issue is also that we don't have enough foster parents. We don't have enough licensed foster parents. So there needs to be more initiatives to recruit foster parents and to retain foster parents, because sadly, many first-year foster parents quit. And there's tons of literature out there on what is going on. Why are they quitting? Well, there's not enough support. There's not enough financial support. There's not enough support from the caseworker. So there's a plethora of reasons. And actually, that kind of wants me, I want to do a quick survey. Could I get a volunteer to help write on? Thank you, Miss Alana. And then there's some markers up there. So I just want to kind of do a group discussion. Is that okay? I really like group therapy more than this type of work or individual therapy because I like collective learning. So go ahead and shout out some reasons that you've heard or that you observed on why foster parents quit. Thank you. Not enough support. What else? Conflict with bio parents. Very good. Yeah, that's a good example. Yep. Changing case goals. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Look at our social workers just ready to learn and share. Okay, what else? They got inaccurate information from the caseworker. That often happens. And really, as a foster parent, I had to learn real quickly not to take that personal, because a lot of times the caseworkers also are left in the dark. And there's times where they do know and they omit information. And so as a foster parent, you're discerning and judging, in between all that. And but yeah, that's a big deal. What else? Lack of childcare. Sometimes there's daycares that don't accept a certain kind of funding that the children come with, or there's new foster placements in the home, and from my sad experience with a school district, it often can take a week up to 3 weeks before that, which is illegal for a foster child to be placed in a school district. And they have excuses like, oh, they have an IP, and we have to do our own studies, and we have to get their reports from the previous school. And any time that a child is displaced, they have the right to be enrolled in that school that next day. So childcare, then I was often running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Who can watch my kids while I go to work? Because I'm a single parent. So then that was a big challenge. And then I'm forking money out of my own pocket to try to pay somebody to watch the kids when stuff's going on, or trying to, if they're younger, trying to enroll them in daycare. So yeah, okay. What else? Ooh, okay. Yeah, unrealistic. Yeah, so with that, do you mean like from the foster parents having unrealistic expectations? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well said, and thank you for elaborating. And just for those that didn't hear, that might be in the back, Tiffany was sharing that she used to work with child welfare, and so a lot of times, foster parents can fantasize, oh, I have this dream and this kid, and we're gonna go fishing, and we're gonna go to Disney World, and we're gonna have this lovey-dovey foster family, and then realize this kid's got real stuff going on, and they don't, they have these high expectations, or expectations of themselves, be perfect. And then they fall from grace as foster parents, or the kids can't measure up to those expectations. So yeah, unrealistic expectations all around is a great example. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, especially as a new foster parent, many times social worker, hey, can you just take them for an emergency placement? It'll just be a couple days or a couple of weeks, and then a couple of weeks go by, and they're like, okay, just a couple more months, and then a couple more years. And it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? So, yeah, not respecting that agreement between the worker and the foster parent, and then them feeling misguided. Yeah, so that's a really good one. Man, you guys are on a roll today. I like this afternoon session. Y'all are more chatty than this morning. Y'all were kind of quiet and timid. I know, yeah. I was like, we need to start later in the day. It was early for me too. Any other ideas? 110%. Oh, thank you. Christina got us a microphone so everybody can hear. Thank you, Christina. So she said emotional burnout, exhaustion. Yeah, emotional stress is a huge contributing factor to why foster parents leave. And complex issues, complex trauma, as you all have heard of and are aware and know of. And so then how am I equipped? How do I help this family, or how do I help this kid? And a lot of things going on. And not being able to fix them or see the results that they want to see out of the foster kid as soon as they want to see them. Yeah.
Well, my parents were foster parents for a long time, and because they had their own four kids, when we got a little older, they just said, it's too much, and it was kind of just had to focus on their own kids' needs.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say they were burned out, but it was a great experience. We got overly attached to several kids.
Yes.
We wanted to adopt them, but they had said, nope, not adopting anybody from the beginning. Yeah. And that was really hard. That could have been part of it, but I don't think so. I think they just,
yeah.
4 kids.
So I heard 2 things. First thing was it was a stage of life. So now their kids are getting older, and we're just going to readjust maybe our priorities or our focus, and that is fair and okay. And the second thing I heard was foster parents getting overly attached. And social workers, you're not exempt. So I really liked, in my studies, I took an elective, Vicarious Trauma, Burnout, and Compassion Fatigue. And I was like, I love this topic because it's really learning how to help the helpers. Because even social workers get burnt out and exhausted. That all today was self-care, and we'll talk a little bit about that later too from this perspective. And so I found it interesting that we're taught as social workers to use empathy, and there has been studies shown that empathy is a contributing factor to vicarious trauma. So it's like a double-edged sword. So the more empathic I get, the closer I get, the more attached I get, the more risk there's involved. And so as a practitioner, we're taught what? To practice a clinical distance. You know, there's the transference, countertransference, and the blending and the enmeshment. So you have to have that professional boundaries, and you're providing a professional service. But how does that relate to foster parents? And I would even venture to say it would be important to incorporate a warm distance as foster parents, especially with kids with RAD. The go away, come here, very ambivalent. And so foster parents, they get so excited and they want to hug them and dress them and be in their face and touch them. And, you know, it's you have a lot of love to give. And I would even say it's important to have some restraint. And that might sound a little taboo because it's a different approach than what a typical parent, you know, parents are, you know, to have unconditional love and to lavish the kid with love. They deserve that if they are asking for it, or if they want it or need it. And I'm speaking, again, more so from a foster parent with teens. You know, I'm not talking about littles. You know, as they start hitting puberty and they're getting older, I would even say it's important to have a warm distance and you meet them where they're at. So when they're ready to talk, or they initiate a tap on the shoulder, or they initiate a trauma-sensitive conversation, you're there to support them. But you're not overtly in their face terrorizing to where then they withdraw. So yeah, I mean, overly attached is a contributing factor, and in fact, that's also a big reason why I hear people don't become foster parents. I'll get too attached. Yeah, I'm glad you have a conscience and you have a heart, and to some degree you're going to be attached. And then I'm also thinking as a level B foster parent, by the time they're in your home, often there's disruptions, and then you're ready to boot them out the door. You know, so I'm being real. So I'm speaking as a therapist. I'm also speaking as a foster parent. Okay, so understand those domains. All right. Any other thoughts? Couple in the back. Can you say that again in the microphone?
David.
Me and Kelly used to work together. Yeah.
The foster parents' own trauma history that they feel like they've already worked through, and then they get this child who has trauma in their home, and suddenly they're triggered and they can no longer handle or deal with their own trauma and the child's trauma too.
Yes, and actually I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later. And yes, that is a great example. And a lot of times people think that they don't have trauma triggers, or that they're okay, or they've already gone to therapy, or they've already worked through things. And then that kid's in their home and it's like, oh crap, I didn't know that was in me. And so, and then it's like, oh yeah, and then I'm going to distance myself, or I can't do this, it's too much. And yeah, so the foster parent's own trauma history and triggers can contribute to that. Totally, yes.
I would say that also aggression from the foster child to the foster parent's children, because then they're going to prioritize their own children's safety.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that one, another deterrent too is hotlines, because if you have a foster youth and if they're threatening to make allegations, that can scare away foster parents from continuing to foster.
Yeah, so two things you said, and I'm actually going to touch on that a little bit more with the anger outbursts that the children have and the family conflict that can cause, and having to make hard decisions, and the right decisions and supported decisions that are supported by others is important with supporters that are non-judgmental. And then what was that second part that you had?
Just gonna have a panic attack.
This is exposure therapy to get you.
So the second one is like the fear of a foster child making an allegation towards the foster parent, and them getting investigated or having their children removed, and stuff like that. It can deter foster parents from continuing to foster.
Yeah, and those that have fostered or been involved with fostering, they teach in the training, it's not a matter of if you get hotline, it's a matter of when. and learning the difference between being hotlined and a hotline being substantiated or a hotline being investigated. And so I think sometimes it's so much to learn. I think a lot of times foster parents forget. But I had one kid for respite stay at my home, and it was late and it was getting close to bedtime, and he didn't want to go to bed. And I'm like, well, it's bedtime. In our home, we have structure and rules. So, and of course, he's 16 or so. And so he's like, forget it. So I'm in my room. One of the other kids knocks on my door and was like, so-and-so just took off. Take off like to Walmart, like walking the streets, like took off where? And they're like, we don't know. He just left the building. This is like, at this time, it was around midnight. So our protocol with Missouri Alliance, and this is another thing, is agency policies and prudent parenting. That was a big one that I was excited about. But with our protocol is we wait an hour. Typically on the age, they're older, so we wait an hour because a lot of times they just need to blow off steam, cool down. Sometimes it's a coping skill, DBT. You're walking outside, feeling the cold air, to help orient the person. So he left. Long story short, police officer found this juvenile walking the streets, and the minor foster son had told the police officer that I had kicked him out and locked him out of the house. So the police officer brought him back, and this was like my first hotline. And he's like, well, this is what the kid said, and so I will have to hotline it because I have to hotline, what was reported and what he reported, even though I was like, that's not true, and I have the other kids to witness. And I got a little freaked out, because I'm like, what does this mean? So yeah, that's a big deal. And sometimes they're true allegations, sometimes they're not. And so I get it. You have to be safe than sorry. So educating foster parents and being supportive. Well, what do you think this looks like? What it entails? Providing some of that psychoeducation can help. Yeah. Okay, what else? I think it's a pretty good list. Give your guys yourselves a pat on the back. Thank you. Let's give Alana a warm clap. So this paints a really good picture of the barriers as social workers we have to overcome. This is to paint a picture of awareness, of what we're seeing, of what we're hearing. There's probably other examples that contribute to burnout or reluctance to becoming foster parents, but this is kind of scratching the surface of what that looks like. And so as social workers, our responsibility is to take action and be agents of change. Okay. So that's going to kind of lead me to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about fostering wisdom versus naivety. Did I say that word right, naivety? Sometimes we're pronouncing words weird, and you're like, what are you trying to say? So we'll just pretend it is. All right, so I want to explain what the difference is between knowledge and experiential knowledge, because I think there's a gap in understanding the difference as our approach as social workers in working with foster parents. So, what is knowledge? Knowledge is typically secondhand understanding that a person gets from another person or from a book or from school. It's something that's taught. So, like in foster parent trainings, we're gaining lots of knowledge, and we're hearing these stories, and we're learning, what to expect, how to approach things, and so that knowledge is important to have. However, there is a huge discrepancy between knowledge and experiential knowledge. So experiential knowledge is typically first-hand understanding of a situation when a person actually lives it. And as social workers, we are to be culturally competent, learning from the lived experiences of others. And it might be easier to do that with foster kids, and it's important that we do that with the foster parents too, that we learn from their lived experiences, we're validating their lived experiences, and we're addressing those lived experiences rather than being dismissive or making light of those behaviors. So, kind of like the ocean. What's the difference? If I were to tell you, here in Missouri, we're not connected to any ocean, far from it, and the ocean's beautiful, it's great, it's warm, and the salty waters, and you can go surfing, and beautiful sunsets, and sandy beaches, and you can just really, you can eat out on the beach. The ocean's beautiful. You have to go. The waves are so much fun to have. They paint this picture of this expectation of the person of what the ocean is. But a person's experiential knowledge will always differ. So when they go to the ocean, some of those things might be true, and there might be a whole lot of things about the ocean the person lives and experiences that is nothing like what they were told. Well, they didn't tell me there was jellyfish and that I get stung, or that my foot almost got captured by seaweed and I almost drowned, or I saw a shark and, I peed my pants, So I don't, there's parts of the story, and it kind of goes back to what Tiffany said earlier. There's those unrealistic expectations that's often painted by media, TV. I don't know, has anybody seen those Adopt Us Kids commercials for Missouri on TV right now? Like back to back, there's tons of them. And I love it, and it paints a picture, and it's really to recruit people to adopt kids. And I could spend 3 hours talking about adoption too. It paints a picture, though, of what it's like, and it's not the whole picture. And therefore, a lot of times there's people that are interested in becoming foster parents, but then once they start going through the trainings or they hear the real stories, then they start to withdraw. I'm like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So it's important that foster parents understand the difference between knowledge and experiential knowledge. And here's my first recommendation. This is important to know. This is what I've observed and what I've seen as a foster parent. It is important. So in social work school, Natalie had mentioned it earlier, there's 3 main components to social work education: knowledge, skills, and value, ethics, the morals. And I realized, hindsight, and I even talked to some other foster parents too, because I wanted to hear what their experiences were like. And there was a common theme that foster parent trainings have a strong emphasis on 2 of those: knowledge, what to expect, trauma-informed care, and values. Don't spank the kids. Don't lock them up. Don't kick them out of the house. So you learn some of the basics, like on how to interact and the right kind of parenting, natural consequences. But there was a big deficit in the skills component. And I realized in grad school for the social work program, that's our pedagogy. That's what sets social work apart, is the practicum, is the observations, it's the supervision, it's talking and working out things and the exposure to see what it's like. And so my recommendation is our foster parent trainings need to incorporate more of a skills-based component. What does that look like? For example, role play scenarios. I don't know if anybody's done the mental health first aid training. That I think me and Sarah went to the same one a while back, and I really liked how they had the role play scenarios. So you're going to present as a client with suicidal ideation. You're going to represent a bystander. This is the presenting scenario. Act. And so then it kind of helped those people interact and know what to say, know what to do, how to improve those engagement skills, and I might have said that kind of funny. Maybe I should have said it differently. And it also helps everybody else in the group kind of see how things are going. I do remember another part of the skills component that our foster parent training needs to have is, I remember at the very end of our foster parent training, we had like a current foster parent come in, and we got to do a Q&A. And it was like for an hour. Out of like 80 plus hours, 1 little hour, we got to ask her those hard questions. What do you do? Have you ever experienced this? Would you take these kind of kids? Real hard questions. And I felt like I was just like a sponge soaking all that up. And I'm like, where was this throughout the entire training? Or hearing stories from foster kids. This is what I've experienced. This is what I've gone through, and this is what I needed. This is how I needed help. We're not hearing real life stories. We'll see. My foster parent trainings, it was like the stars, and this was years ago, okay, because this was back in 2012, and it was like videos from the 90s and these like fake dramas, and kids, and it really kind of shallowly paints a picture of what fostering's like, but in reality, it's really still nothing, So, as my recommendation, we need to advocate for Or if you're part of the decision-making process with foster parent trainings, we need to see what we can do to incorporate more skills-based training to improve the experiential knowledge of foster parents. Can I get an amen from my front row? I told y'all they're my amen corner. All right. So that's the first thing I learned that I kind of experienced, as a foster parent. And so now I want to kind of talk about the 3 top lessons that I can recall learning from the foster parent trainings. I'm not here to undo or change and completely uphaul all the trainings and what's going out there. It's to build precept upon precept, strength upon strength. And so there were some really important key concepts that I think was helpful as a foster parent that you guys can also be aware of. And then also it brings awareness on how to engage foster parents. Because really, all this is applicable not just for foster kids or foster parent engagement between foster kids, but social workers and engagement with foster parents. So, Bill the trainer, do you guys see Bill? That's not really Bill. I just found some random stock photo and just added. But he was real grandfatherly. He was older. He used to be a foster parent years ago, and he was involved with Missouri Lions. He might still be doing trainings to this day, but just real wise, and just you could really soak up anything he said. And so one of the first things I remember to this day that really helped shape my fostering was he got the whiteboard and he wrote it was 2 words: behavior equals communication. And he spent probably 45 minutes talking about how behavior equals communication. Now, social workers, we understand that to some degree. Nonverbal versus verbal communication. We're eliciting data, all that information. We're paying attention to how they're sitting, how they're looking, how they're dressed, how they're talking, etc. So as a foster parent, this was a newer concept to me. And what it really helped me understand was he said, children, that is their primary way to communicate because of the developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. A lot of these kids have trauma brain. They're constantly living in a high acuity of stress. And so they don't know how to say, when you take away my toys, that makes me feel really sad, and I want to throw the remote across the room, but I need your help to prompt me to the bedroom to use a coping skill to calm down. If I heard a 3 or 5-year-old say that, I'd be like, that's a miracle child, little Jesus prodigy. I'd be shocked, right? We don't hear kids talk like that, or teens, or adults. Us adults struggle with that too. So it really helped paint a picture of when a kid is stealing, what's really going on? What are they really saying? I'm not going to shame that kid. There was a story that he shared in the foster parent training on how there was this newer foster parents, and they had this little girl. She was first grade, around that age. And they said they were cleaning her room one day while she was at school. And they found this bucket of batteries. And they're like, why does she have all these batteries? Why? And she was taking them from the remotes, taking them from toys. They found out she would take them from school, or anytime they went to the store, she would try to find batteries and hoard them. And so to the naked eye, I'm like, that's stealing, you don't take, that's bad, and shame. And instead, what he's saying is, after some conversations to find out what was going on, they had talked to the caseworker, and there was a long history of the birth parents using meth. And so one of those ingredients that they used to make meth was batteries. And so they conditioned and trained their daughter to get batteries when she's out in the community to help supply their substance use addiction. So it's easy to quickly judge and be like, what's going on? Or if a kid lies. I know it's funny because we talk about trauma triggers for some foster parents. That's a big one for foster parents. I don't care what they do, but they cannot lie to me. That is my line. When they lie, there's no trust. We have nothing. And trust me, I got mine. Mine's not so much lying, but I got mine, and we'll share it here in a bit. But so for when a kid's lying, what's behind it? They've been conditioned oftentimes to not tell the truth to protect themselves. Because if they told the truth, they got beat, or they went to bed hungry. Neglect is one of the biggest reasons why kids come into the system. It's not even abuse. Again, just a reminder, trauma's two things. Trauma's the bad things that have happened to you. Trauma's also the good things that didn't. And that could also be taught to foster parents too, with those trauma triggers, the good things that did not happen to you that you deserved. My parents always taught me and my brothers, you were created to be loved, protected, nurtured, and celebrated. So anytime there was a lack of, there's potential trauma. There's a deficiency. And so with that approach, I try to approach the same with the foster kids. So for example, even celebration, I do yearly. I celebrate the day that God brought you into this world. So birthdays are a big thing in my home. And then I also celebrate the year anniversary that they were placed in my home, that God placed in my home. And we celebrate that just as big as their birthdays, because we're trying to speak to their heart. You are safe, you are loved, you are protected, you are cared about, you are nurtured, and so we're constantly trying to teach that. So when a child is communicating, typically it's through their actions, what they're doing, their behaviors. And so in the foster parent training and ongoing, we need to understand, even my recommendations as social workers, we need to understand with foster parents, their behaviors equals communication. There's oftentimes an emotional aloofness between caseworkers and foster parents. And so I love doing this. If I have to call a caseworker for one of my boys, to get their SSN number or, what's their birth date, or I need this form filled out, when I call them, I usually preface it with, good news, nothing bad, I just need some general information. Because I know a lot of times the social workers are burnt out, exhausted, they got high caseloads, and so, they always get nervous when that call comes in and how they're going to respond. And so same thing, social workers, I want to challenge you when we, or just in general, if you work with anybody that's a foster parent, to understand if they start to withdraw, they're saying something. If you haven't heard from them in a while, that's saying something. If they seem really low mood, they seem different, they seem more irritable, that's really them saying help. Does that make sense? So as social workers, we really have to learn how to read between the lines, be more emotionally connected, and understand what's going on, because as we know, prevention is the better intervention. So when we're taking action at the beginning, hey, I'm just checking in, seeing how you're doing. I love it when a caseworker or my licensing worker, hey, do you need anything from me this week? I think I'm good. Because then I feel that connected, I feel that support. And I know it's a risk when the social worker asks me. Okay. So, the second thing that Bill the trainer had taught me was that he had also wrote this on the board, and this really helped me with long-term fostering. And he said, dysfunctional people are not dysfunctional all the time. I'll say that again. Dysfunctional people are not dysfunctional all the time. So, as a foster parent, that really helped me understand when a foster child's placed in my home, they had some really good times with their parents. They had some really good time with their family. We hear the bad stuff. We hear the trauma or the exposure or the neglect. And we have to also be willing to see the good stuff too. There's the dialectics, the good and the bad, and accept it all. That was also applicable as a foster parent when I would engage my community and I had a foster son in my home that disrupted and had to leave my home. Oh, they were such a good kid. They seemed so nice. They were so smart. They were so kind. They were always smiling. Because dysfunctional people are not dysfunctional all the time. Yes, you're right. Most of the time, things were great. Most of the time, things were good. Yeah, there's some sneaky, deviant behaviors, sneaking around. But for the overall, what they've gone through, and they're doing the best they can, yeah, that is how it is most of the time. But when the times get dark, they get dark and scary. And to the point, like I told you, I took in foster teen boys. They're as big as me, some of them even bigger. And when they have anger outbursts, it's terrifying. And I tell the boys, as soon as they come in my home, I will never lay a hand on you to harm you. I won't even lay a hand on you, period. If you want a hug, you can ask for a hug, but I'm just not that kind of person. I also have to be mindful of my stature. I look like a big guy. I have a beard. And I have to be mindful of how I present to others. Because a lot of times when I try to look caring and concerning, this furrowed eyebrow actually makes me look like I'm mad. So knowing that self-awareness and how I present, it's also important for social workers to know how they present with foster kids and with foster parents. So I had this one kid, and long story short, he got into some significant trouble, so he couldn't go to school. He was in high school, and I had to go to work. So I had set up an arrangement for a sitter that I was going to pay to watch him at the house because he couldn't go to school while I went to work. Because I still have to pay my bills. I got a job. So when the foster child found out that he's getting a babysitter, he didn't like that. He's grown. I don't need a babysitter. I don't need somebody to come watch me. And he flipped his lid, started yelling, cussing, and I'm like, well, it is what it is. I got to go to work, and I'm just very, I'm always disengaging. I'm not going to entertain that or get into a verbal, because we would spend 2 hours arguing. So I go to the car's in the garage. He comes around behind the garage, behind the car door. He's banging on the window. He's yelling at me, cussing. He wasn't going to let me leave. He's like, if I'm here, you're staying here too. If I'm trapped, you're trapped with me. And I'm like, and so here I am, but I am also feeling threatened. And I'm like, well, at this point, he's yelling, he's cussing. I had the other kids. They were feeling nervous as well. It's a family unit. That's another thing. Sometimes not even your own natural kids. It's your other foster kids in the home. And you have to have that family perspective as well, that family approach to care. And so I had to call the police. And of course, as soon as police showed up, perfect little angel, and everything was good, and chit-chatting and hanging out. And I'm like, they didn't see what I just saw, that they think I'm being a drama queen, because here I am calling the police and he's just chill, So again, it kind of feeds into that. There are some really dark times. And so we also have to be willing to accept a person for the good and the bad, for the bright times and the dark times. I mean, it's in almost every kind of relationship. So as social workers, the recommendation is don't be quick to judge. Because I bet it's easy, those foster parents, if they were my kid. And I've known a caseworker who would often judge foster parents and would also often blame the foster parents for the kids' behaviors, shifting the blame, projecting the blame. And so that caseworker decided, well, I'm going to be a foster parent, and I'm going to show them how to do it. And I'm going to take on this kid because he's a great kid. And guess what? That kid didn't last long in that caseworker's home. So as social worker, I'm like, I got some understanding from some other foster parents in the room. So as social workers, it's important to understand that we can't be quick to judge those foster parents. It's more important to be culturally competent and learn from their lived experiences. Okay. I could be there forever. All right, next point, build the training. The third part from the training, the third and final part that I thought was very important to highlight was Bill had taught us how foster kids, and as you guys probably know, are often institutionalized. What does that mean in brief? They often go from foster home to foster home. They often go from residential home to residential, group home to group home. And so then they become this like product that really presents kind of robotic, cold, callous, and they struggle to fit in a foster home, or they will often struggle to create their own family because of being institutionalized. And so I remember there was one foster kid in my home, and this is what really kind of made that truth reality for me, was he was in my home, and he was telling me about the first surgery he had to have. I was like, oh, what, your appendix taken out? I'm thinking like adenoids, tonsils, something like that. He goes, no, I had to have several of my toenails surgically removed. Like, how come? Like, what was going on there? Like, I'd never heard of that. He goes, well, for the longest time, living, I had shoes too small for my feet. And so I didn't know it. I thought they were just shoes. And so for years, I was always wearing shoes too small. And so my toenails got severely infected. So they all had to get removed. I mean, talk about the role and responsibility of a parent to make sure they got the right clothes, the right shoes, to make sure they had their dental hygiene and their vision checked. And oftentimes, foster kids become institutionalized. They have the lack of ability to advocate for themselves. And really, it's the parent's responsibility to some degree to make sure the needs are being met of the child. So, I learned as a foster parent from that training that oftentimes foster children become institutionalized, their needs go unmet, they have maladaptive coping behaviors, they have a lot of struggles, and I often would be quick to say, you know what, I can't help you. You know what, you're too far gone. You know what, I've done all that I could do. And I would get in my emotion mind, DBT, the wise mind, rational mind. I would often be in my emotion mind. And I had to learn how to develop a wise mind. And so for me, what often helped is sometimes I just needed a break. So instead of making a big decision with kids in my home, in the flip of a moment or in that dysfunctional time, I would sleep on it. And I would tell myself, I'm going to go to bed tonight. Like if there was a near disruption situation, I would say, you know what? I'm just, this kid, what they got going on, before I make any decision or call the caseworker, I just need to sleep on it and see how I feel in the morning. And so as social workers, to help with retention rates with foster parents, sometimes it's helping them process, validate what they're saying, and then giving them some space and time or opportunity for space and time to make a well-informed decision based on what's best for the parents and what's best for the foster child. It's not an either or. All right, moving on. You guys still with me? All right. One person is. Thank you, Tiffany. All right, so Zach, if you'll hit the next slide. So these are the top 3 lessons that I learned in experiential knowledge, okay? Basically, what I did not really get in the trainings and what I just had to learn the hard way, okay? So the first one, and I think Kelly had mentioned it earlier, and somebody else, is that there are trauma triggers that are unique and unpredictable for every person. As a social worker, you have unique and unpredictable trauma triggers that you may not even know you have. Same goes for the foster children. Same goes for the foster parents. And so learning how to listen for them and how to respect them. I remember one of the foster sons that I had in my house. You never know. They tell you trauma triggers can be anything. It could be smells, it could be places, it could be faces. You never know. And one kid that I had in my home, he did not like chocolate. No matter what, he would not eat chocolate. And it's like every kid in my home, they have a big sweet tooth. Like they would eat the whole pantry of chocolate if I had one. So I have to I'm not about to give somebody juvenile diabetes, so we're gonna cut down on the sugar. So, but with him, I had nothing to worry about. I was like, he's not a big chocolate eater. And so one day I'm like, what is the reason? Is it just you don't like chocolate? Did you used to be allergic to chocolate? And so then he tells me basically, and I would even give him a hard time, like, oh, look, it's a chocolate ice cream bar sundae, and just kind of taunt him, like, do you want some? Are you sure? Your taste buds change. And I'm not really being emotionally attuned and sensitive to what his lived experiences were. And so then finally I asked him, and he shared with me, he goes, well, when me and my birth parents were living in the tents in Florida, I was hungry one time because we hadn't eaten in a long time. So I snuck one of my dad's chocolates and I ate it. So when he found out, he stuck his hands down my throat to make me throw it back up. And he goes, so ever since then I can't eat chocolate. Note taken. David, lay off it. Respect it. Don't joke with him anymore. Don't give him a hard time. There's chocolate still in the house. He doesn't go into a panic or a frenzy. He doesn't, he just doesn't eat it, and he knows that. So as a foster parent, I had to learn how to respect that, and I had to learn how to listen because you never know what it is. And so I don't want to be brass and, full of austerity and not really give a flip on what their trauma triggers are. And as social workers, it's also important to understand what the unique and unexpected trauma triggers are in the foster parents and how to process it, how to explore it, how to respect it. So, for example, I learned quickly that my trauma trigger is kids with anger outbursts. When I would have kids in my home, again, they're as big as me, tall as me. It don't matter. I've seen 9-year-olds, y'all know, I've seen 9-year-olds with trauma triggers and they have anger outbursts. They're like the Incredible Hulk. And we've heard stories and we've seen it where they've taken down police officers. It could be terrifying. And so I had this one kid in my home, and he had been in my home he was one of the first kids placed in my home. So I'm naive and like, oh, I could help him, I could fix him. And, I'll keep winking an eye every time he hits another foster kid, or I'll keep winking an eye and saying it's okay when you've assaulted the kids at school, and I'll keep winking an eye and make light of the problem behavior that he was assaulting kids here at church. I mean, it went on every month, several fights with the same kids, different kids. Anything could set him off, he'd blow up. He cussed me out, cussed everybody out, and I just thought I had to take it. And it wasn't until he started to try to attack me that I realized, yeah, this is just where I draw the line, which made me feel like a hypocrite because I'm like, should I have drawn the line when he hit the first couple kids? And then I'm backing out when he finally hits me, and I should be able to take it. So I had this high acuity of stress. I'm going to talk a little bit about vicarious trauma here in a little bit, but I was always walking on eggshells everywhere I went. And especially guys, we're pretty good at having a poker face. We're pretty good at having flat affect and acting like everything's okay. But deep down there, the duck's feet are just paddling under the water, under the surface. Our minds are going. And so I asked him, I said, caseworkers, do not put kids with severe anger outbursts in my home. I've had so much stress, it's caused me to almost want to burn out, quit fostering altogether. Do not place guess which kind of kids they'd be placing in my home every time afterward? Kids with anger outbursts. It was like they gave no flip. They were not aware, to the point where I almost just gave up altogether. And instead, I just asked more poignant, direct questions, and I would do my own investigative questions to find out, I like Missouri Alliance's mantra, and it's not for placing foster kids, and they go by, it's not just any home, the right home. So they try as much as they can to place, I've seen some eyes rolled, to try to place a kid in the right foster home, not just in any foster home. Well, I'm like, y'all should learn that lesson 10 years after I was a foster parent, because y'all just be placing anybody in my home. So as social workers, we have to learn how to respect what those are. Okay. Let's keep moving on. So the second part that I had learned in fostering is that I tried to become this forecaster, this weatherman. I was trying to take pride in myself, like I can tell when a kid's gonna be a really good fit in my home, or I can tell when like they're gonna do really well, or if they're just not gonna do well. And I would have unrealistic expectations of the kids, they would have unrealistic expectations of me, and so I'm trying everything I can, to set the course right by having the right kid in the home. And it's like I got it wrong every time, just like Joplin's weathermen. No, I'm just joking. I'm totally just joking. Shots fired. I'm joking. But I'm like, I got it wrong no matter what. So, for example, some of the kids that I thought would be the easiest kids that would do well and gel were some of the most problematic kids in my home. And I'm like, it just right over my head. And I'm like, I've been doing this for years. Tons of foster parents quit the first year. I'm not a first-year foster parent, and I still can't get it right. Why? Because these are real humans. These are real lives. These are real kids with their own unique experiences, unique lived experiences. And so I had to learn how to bring to death my own expectations on the kids. I had to learn how to unexpect the expected. I'll give you an example. I had one foster kid, the caseworker called me, hey, can you take this kid? I know you have an opening. He's he's 17, and and she's just giving me brief information. And I've learned what kind of questions to ask and really how to tell, some basic information. So I'm like, well, what happened in his previous placement? Well, and so she kind of slyly tells me, in the previous foster home, he got upset. He was being antagonized by another kid in the home. So, he took a book and he wrote out his plans on how he's going to murder everybody in the home, and even drew pictures of them all, how he's going to kill them, and had colored it in. And this is not a little kid. This is a 16-year-old kid, teen. And she's, like, as a matter of fact, casual, like he would never do that. And I'm like, and you're asking me to take this kid? Like, does he need to go to juvie? Does he need to go to residential? Does he need to, am I really cut out? Do I want to be next on his hit list? And something in me said, you know what? Let's give the kid a chance. I'll meet the kid. We'll just see. So we met. She brought him, and he seemed real gentle, real timid, real calm, real quiet. And first impression, I'm like, I'm thinking dysfunctional people are not dysfunctional all the time. Is this a mask? Is this a facade? Is it that he doesn't want to go to residential, so he's going to paint, the honeymoon phase, you guys know fostering. Is he going to paint this picture, and then I have this next Jeffrey Dahmer on my hands, I tell you I like to joke. So I'm listening, and I'm hearing his heart, and I'm really like, you know what? He wants to be in my home. I never take a kid that don't want to be in my home. And I'll say that right up front. It's got to be a two thing. You have to want to be in my home, and I have to want you to be in my home. So he wants to be in my home, and we're talking about it. And I finally said, I'm going to make this real clear. Because I've been a veteran foster parent for a little bit longer, so I'm a little bit more blunt up front. Saves me a lot of time. And I said, you're 16. You're a young man. You're coming into adulthood. And pretty soon, you will be considered a legal adult here in Missouri. I actually like having these hard talks with some boys because it really sets the precedent, not to be fear-based, but to help them, because a lot of times their egos are stroked, or people make light and wink at the problematic behaviors, and they get away with figuratively murder. So sometimes they need to have those hard conversations. And I said, let me make it clear. I said, if you ever threaten in any type of way, words, pictures, journal, the lives of anybody in my home, I'm not going to call your little caseworker like your previous foster parents did. I'm going to call Joplin Police Department. And then you could be at risk for going to juvie, or depending on your age, jail. So I just want to make that real clear. I set those strong boundaries right up front. And I tell you, social workers, he was one of the kids that did the best in my home. He was in my home longer than most of the kids I've ever had in my home, for a couple years, until he transitioned out of my home, successfully transitioned out of my home. So it wasn't like a common disruption like a lot of kids, Missouri Lions Level B kids. And I was just like, what if I would have said no? What if I wouldn't have taken a chance? What if I would have just looked at the data? What if I would have just looked at the paperwork? Nobody in their right mind would have said yes. So maybe I am a little crazy. A good kind of crazy. So I had to learn how to unexpect the expected. And sometimes taking those chances, taking those risks, they do pay off. All right. The third part that I learned through experiential knowledge to cultivate wisdom was how to parent differently. Any parents in the room, foster or birth kids? Anybody have kids in the room? Keep your hand raised if you have more than one kid. Now, keep your hand raised if you parent each sibling differently. Okay. Now, I'm impressed to see most of those hands still stayed up. Yes, there's universal laws and values that we treat the kids the same. Like if you have parenting structure or discipline, you don't spank your kids, you do spank your kids, lots of privileges or what. There might be some similarities, but for the most part, each kid is so unique and of themselves, you can't parent them the same way. And when I went into fostering, I'm like, oh, I think my parents did a pretty good job raising me and my brothers. We're productive citizens. We're, not out there in jail or, just living a wild life. So I'm going to parent these foster kids the way I was parented. I'm going to treat them, I'm going to love on them, and I'm going to discipline them just like how I was. And I learned real quick it don't work. And even with the same foster kids, when one foster kid came to my home, even if he had a similar background, I cannot parent the same. I have to find what works for that kid and implement it. So for example, a loss of privileges for disciplinary action. And let me just say it real quick. With foster parents, sometimes they understand discipline, and I'm not saying corporal punishment, spank your kids. And when I say discipline, I'm not saying punishment, because there's a clear difference. And natural consequences can be a form of discipline when you have a conversation and you're intentional on connecting the behaviors to the natural consequences. Because sometimes we don't even connect the dots for the kids. So with discipline helps relieve the guilt of the child. So when a child makes a mistake or messes up and you just wink on it or cover it under the rug or you don't pay much attention to it, then they can walk around with that guilt and shame. There's no restitution involved. There's no reconciliation. There's no restoration in the relationship or within. And then we wonder why they hit 20, 25 years old and they're doing all these problematic behaviors. Because everyone, when they were kids, made light of their problem behaviors. So we have to be intentional with the discipline. Kids, teens, all of them in general, even foster kids, need boundaries, need structure, need routine, need discipline out of love. So I had to learn how to do that differently with each kid. So for one, the loss of privilege might be, if you have, I'm more of in positive reinforcement, so I'll give them like incentives for having good grades, like money incentives. But for one kid, it doesn't work. And so then a lot of times I'm having those conversations, well, what do you think should happen if you have all failing grades? Or what do you think should happen if you have all passing grades? I've had to learn how to lower the bar. And a lot of times it don't matter how hard I try or how hard that kid tries, they're a product of the system. And research, literature has shown how foster kids are academically at a lot lower level than their peers because they go from place to place and there's a significant drop in their academics. And so how to meet them where they're at and how to advocate for them. Okay. So let's keep moving on because I want to be mindful of the time. Let's talk a little bit about fostering self-care versus vicarious trauma on the next slide. And I kind of like that post up there. It says self-care isn't selfish. And I would have to say that was a very hard concept for me to grasp as a new foster parent. Like, what is self-care? How do I practice it? Most of you know, one of the main forms of self-care for foster parents is respite. And so, what does that look like for foster parents? Well, before we get to that, let's define what vicarious trauma is. And Natalie shared some good examples of definitions of vicarious trauma. I'm going to share another example of a definition. Vicarious trauma is a secondhand trauma that negatively impacts those who are in the helping services. For example, therapists, caseworkers, foster parents. Vicarious trauma could be defined as the transformation of the inner man that causes the helper to experience vulnerability, disorientation, and polarized moods and behaviors. So I have a vicarious trauma symptomology sheet. Miss Alana and Sarah, would you guys mind taking those copies and just kind of pass them out? And as I kind of share a little bit about this, they're going to pass you some copies. In my classes, in my studies, there was this book where they do a symptomology of burnout, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, PTSD, vicarious trauma. So this is just one excerpt from that study from the book. And I'll have the references here at the very end. But I kind of like the domains of what vicarious trauma looks like. And as you kind of look over it, you can kind of also do some self-reflection to say, in like the behavioral or the cognitive or the emotional, is this a check for me? Is this a check for me? Is this a check for me? And this is a tool that you can also look at or use when you're engaging with foster kids, parents, with foster parents. And when you're kind of noticing foster parents exhibiting these signs and these symptoms, that's how you're starting to understand, okay, maybe they got some vicarious trauma going on. I will say, as a foster parent, I probably know more about that foster kid's trauma than their therapist does. I'm with them. When that foster kid goes into that therapist's office, it's a strange place, it's a strange person. They're not going to spread eagle their trauma history until a very long time when they can trust that therapist, typically speaking. As a foster parent, I never know when I'm going to hear part of their trauma. One of the most impactful memories I have of this was when I was driving through McDonald's with the boys in the car. I tell you, if I needed a good talk with the boys, it's take them in the car. Because a therapist and a client facing, especially for teenage boys, it's very intimidating. It's a very confrontational approach. Oftentimes when there was eye contact, it's because you're in trouble, not because you're doing great. And so when we're having serious talks and we're like this, oftentimes the foster kids shut down. So in the car format, everybody's facing forward. And most of the time, that is when I hear some of the horrific, saddest stories I have ever heard. And they'll just talk about it nonchalantly. They'll talk about it very naturally. And so we're in the McDonald's parking lot. I'm like, what do you want? And I'm asking the boys, and one of the boys goes, I want a McChicken. I'm like, I noticed you get a McChicken every time we come here. He goes, yeah, it makes me think of my mom. You know, I miss my mom. Do you think she's in heaven? I was like, I'm like, oh snap, like this got serious real quick. I was like, well, what do you think? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I've wrestled with it, you know. And then he begins to share with me the story of his mom and how he was a young boy, lived with his mom and his mom's boyfriend. And one night, he's in his mom's room and he's watching cartoons, and he notices his mom is like passing out on the bed. And so he gets frantic and worried, and he's like, Mom, and she's, not responding. So he goes and he gets the mom's boyfriend, who he doesn't like because he's a druggie. And he's like, hey, she's not waking up. Is she okay? And this is a kid. He's a kid at this time, trying to save his mom. And he goes, oh, yeah, she probably overdosed. She just needs to sleep it off. So he stays in mom's room, and he's worried. And he's like, should I call 911? Should I call for help? Maybe he's right. Maybe she just needs to sleep it off. So he told me he stayed up all night long watching cartoons while his mom laid in bed. And he said it was probably early in the morning, 6 or 7. And he's like, you know what? She's not responding. She's not getting better. I'm going to call 911. And I'm not going to tell him. So he gets the phone. He calls 911. Paramedics come. Police come. And they said, she's been dead for a long time. She died a while ago, several hours ago. And so the tremendous guilt and tremendous shame that he gets to carry on the shoulders the rest of his life, thinking, did I make the right decision? Should have I called 911 earlier? Maybe I could have saved my mom. Maybe she would have lived. So maybe she's not in heaven. Maybe she overdosed on purpose. Maybe she tried to kill herself. Maybe she didn't love me. I mean, these are the thoughts he's wrestling with. Imagine day in, day out, he's wrestling with these memories and these thoughts. I'm just a foster parent. How am I supposed to respond? I mean, and then it's like, as a foster parent, you have somewhat of a poker face, but how do you keep a poker face with that story? My heart broke from, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and that wasn't your fault. I'm just a foster parent. I'm not a therapist at this time. And I just felt this grace come over me. And I just felt, you know what? And we don't have to play God. We don't have to say if she's in heaven or not. We don't have to play that. I think what's important to know is you did what you thought was right. She cared about you. She loved you. I bet she wishes she was still here. So as a foster parent, that's a lot to hear. I've not been trained. I've not gone to school. Did I say the right thing? Talk about the emotional stress we had talked about earlier. Was that enough? This was all in McDonald's. This wasn't in family therapy. This wasn't at a school. This wasn't at home. This was at McDonald's. And I'm like, we need a Big Mac and double quarter pounder. And, I'm like, how do we process that and order all at the same time? I'm not going to just take off and be like, shut that down. And, there it is. Because when they're ready to talk, we have to be open. We have to listen when they're ready as much as possible. So I say that to say, as therapists, as social workers, you hear it. You're so exposed and you are so at risk for vicarious trauma, like empathy is a contributing factor to vicarious trauma. Even more so with foster parents, you guys, because they're getting closer, they're taking care of them. They're with them a lot longer than the social worker is. So you're hearing all the stories all the time. So there are 3 recommendations that as social workers, we can promote self-care in the foster parents to help with foster parent longevity. And again, when the foster parents stay in the race, it helps the kids too. You treat the parent, you treat the child. So when you're promoting the interests and the well-being and the care of the foster parents, subsequently, you're also helping that kid too. You're at the best interest of that kid too. It's both and. All right. So I talked a little bit about earlier, respite. I would say probably the number 1 primary way to practice self-care for foster parents is respite. And I want everybody to repeat after me. I will not. I know you're like, I'm scared what he's going to make us say. I will not respite shame foster parents. Let's just say that one more time to get it in your soul. I will not respite shame foster parents. I will make this real clear. And when I was in the foster parent training, they would tell us stories. Oh, we want you to take respite. Respite's important. You get 3, with Missouri Alliance, we get 2 days of respite and 1 vacation day that rolls over. So a little bit more than like Children's Division and their higher needs kids. And so we want you to use those 3 days a month. You have to use respite. It's so important. And then literally an hour later, they're telling us a story of how this one foster family took their bio kids to Disney World but left the foster kids behind. Repeat after me. I will not respite shame foster parents. I know that's a hard concept to grasp, but me and only 2 other people have lived it. And so it's real easy. I'm not trying to get preachy, to eat from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. It's real easy to have that judgment and say, I would never do that. That's horrible. How would a foster parent do that and leave those kids? Ask them, hey, what's it going? Where are you going? That sounds exciting. Promote it. Oh, yeah, you're going to come back feeling refreshed, rejuvenated. As a new foster parent, I wrestled with this. I was like, I'm not going to take respite. I had this holier than thou mentality. I'm not going to take respite. I'm going to be the best foster parent. And if I ever go on vacation, I'm going to take the kids with me. Well, I learned after the first couple of months that's just unrealistic expectations. I can't do it. I need a break. And what helped me is I had a licensing worker, and her name's Patty Kissinger. She was great. She's with another program now. And she was really just that sounding board. She'd check in. She was very emotionally attuned, would just check in how things are going, very supportive. And I said, I want to take respite. I'm burning out, but I feel bad. And at this point, me and Betsy were the only Missouri Alliance foster parents. So most of the time when I took respite, the kids had to get shipped off to St. Louis, Jeff City, Kansas City, Springfield. They had to have a transporter take them for 2 days because we didn't have enough respite providers that were credentialed at that level in this area. So I even felt more guilty. I even had more of an excuse to not take respite. I even had more shame. And I'm like, I just can't do it. I'm wrestling it. She goes, David, She humbled me real quick. She goes, respite is not just for you to have a break from the kids. Respite is also an opportunity for the kids to have a break from you. I was like, oh, that could preach. What? From me? I thought I was a great foster parent. I thought I've been doing a great job. Why would they need a break from me? But can you imagine being a foster kid? There was this one foster kid that I had in my home, and he was older, and I was like, oh, he's going to do well in my home, and he had been there for a little while, and I'm telling you guys, he just hated my guts. I was like, it didn't matter how nice I was. It didn't matter what I did for him, if I went out of my way. It's not just that he hated my guts. He would literally spread lies and rumors to other kids about me. And they're like, that's not true about David. David would never do that. That's not David. And so he would literally go, like, purposely, he would do everything in his power to try to spin things, turn people against me. And I'm like, what did I do? And really, and let me say, for me, part of self-care is prayer. My faith has been one of the greatest mitigators of burnout, compassion, fatigue, because my group therapy is here Sunday mornings at the altar. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, take the wheel. So I'm praying one time, I'm like, Lord, what do I do? Like, I've tried everything, I've done everything. And for me personally, and I'm not trying to force anybody's religion down their throat, we're to learn from each other. And what I heard Father God say, he said, your face is a daily reminder that his parents aren't there. Your face, your presence alone is a trauma trigger. Every day he sees you, he's reminded, he's triggered. It's unnatural for a kid to be in a foster home, and they know it more than anybody else. And so I had to learn real quickly how to change my attitude and to never try to even compete or appear that I'm competing with their birth parents. And I would quickly preface any new foster placement, and I would quickly remind them, I'm just an extra support. I'm just an extra person in your corner, cheering for you, rooting for you. I can never take the place, nor I wouldn't even know how to take the place of your mom and dad. I just get to be that extra person. So, foster kids need breaks from us. They need that space. They need that time where they can just be by themselves or not have to put on a face in front of me or put on an act in front of me. They need that alone time too. It gives them a break. So I will not respite shame foster parents. And in fact, I will promote it. I will celebrate it. I will encourage it. All right. Two other things, for self-care for foster parents, helping them. I liked how Natalie talked about it, creating a self-care plan, being intentional, making a list, when I can do things throughout the day, what my go-tos are, diversifying it, etc. Another thing that I found for me that was very helpful for self-care was I was giving too much attention and focus to just being a foster parent. And I had to learn I am much more than a foster parent. Just as social workers, you are much more than just a social worker. And so I then started being intentional. What are my goals? What are my dreams? What do I want to do? And I decided halfway through fostering, he was like, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree. And maybe I'll be a therapist. And then after that, I was like, okay, by this year, I want to have my master's degree. And by this year, so I started being intentional with my own interests, my own goals. And then also, as we know in psychology, model behavior is often the most exponential learning for kids. More is caught than taught. So when I'm modeling and I'm working hard and I'm reaching my dreams and I'm setting goals, it also paints a picture for the kids to do the same. So as social workers, I encourage you to challenge your foster parents. What are some goals that you have? Where do you see yourself in a year? Where do you see yourself? I remember Ozark Center, they do that. It's like, where do you see yourself in a couple years? And what do you want to do? Or what do you do in your community? So we need to have more of that type of conversation and promoting the interest. And again, when you're helping the foster parent, you're helping the foster child. Oh, very good question. And let me reiterate that so everyone can hear. So she said, would I rather see that from the foster kids caseworker or the foster parent licensing worker? All the above. Any part of the system. Yeah. So what I kind of hear is, just for those that might not be able to hear in brief, if I heard this right, is that, what does this look like, especially like if there's a foster home and they have treatment level kids or treatment level caseworkers, and you have like children's division level kids, traditional level kids and their caseworkers, and not overwhelming the foster parents, and still being supportive and helpful. And really it takes a brief text, a brief conversation. Hey, just checking in to see how you're doing. Hey, I heard that you're going back to school. That is so exciting, and I'm so happy for you. Or hey, I heard that you're planning respite and going to Disney World. I just want to let you know I'm excited for you. And do you need any help with finding a respite placement in the nearby area for the kid? So you're just looking for opportunities to support and help out. And that is such an important question, because I would say it's all the above the system. And these are just examples from my lived experiences, and obviously it's going to look different. And you're right, for some foster parents, that might be overwhelming. But you're really trying to be emotionally attuned to that foster family to know when they're starting to exhibit those vicarious trauma symptoms, when they're feeling burnout, that you're just there, that extra support in that foster parent's corner too, caring about them. Because a lot of times, from my experience, working with the foster kids caseworker, it feels like a sales pitch. Oh, this kid's great. They're going to do good in your home. You should take them. They love the outdoors, and you can go hiking. And really, they have an IP and a little anxiety, but they got meds for it. They're going to be great. You place them in the home, and then you ditch. Peace. That's what it feels like. And I know as a therapist, that's not reality. And I told somebody I had to learn how to not personalize it because you guys are overworked. Natalie said it well. A lot of these agencies and structures, you guys got a lot to do and a little to do it with. So it's sometimes taking the higher road, and it's not competing with the foster parent. Well, I'm overwhelmed too, and I got a lot going on when they chew you out because you weren't there, you didn't see them that month or that week. And yeah, it's different systems. Sometimes it's weekly, monthly, every other month. COVID happened. All that created more barriers. So it's really just saying we're all in this together. We're all a piece of the puzzle, and we all need to be supportive. But really there is somewhat of a hierarchy because even the caseworker's the legal guardian, where the foster parent's just the physical guardian. And sometimes people have to be informed on what that looks like. So even having that hierarchy, you are held more accountable. You have to go in front of the judge and the team, and the foster parent's voice matters too. And so how to promote that and what that looks like and sounds like. So these are just some examples of how to promote that, even as the foster kids caseworker, how to promote this well-being and the foster parents. So that way it's not a me versus you. You're the legal guardian, I'm the physical guardian. What you say I don't agree with, what I say you don't agree with. Anytime there's that yeah. 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 Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm so appreciative, and so yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. And now I'm like, where's the light? Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, and so yeah, there's some bureaucracy. The licensing worker tells you, "Don't step on our toes. That's our job." But again, I would reiterate, it's all of our job. I'm a change agent. I'm a social worker. I don't do the same way that psychologists do, or LPCs do, or that bachelor level psychologists do. I take the initiative. I take action. Yeah, no, you're fine. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. That's not a cue to stop. That's just we won't want to hear you. Yeah.
I was like, my trauma response.
I know.
Yeah,
Who's sneaking up on me? Yeah. Yeah.
so did that kind of make sense what I
Yeah,
was
so
saying?
I just so everyone heard Tiffany, she worked with this like third-party agency that would go in the
Yes.
homes, do a lot of family preservation
Foster Adopt
efforts.
Connect is also in Kansas City, Springfield, and some of these other major cities in Missouri. So I'm kind of surprised that there's not something like that here in Joplin. Yeah, like why there isn't a program here, because you have to have that behavioral specialist to help teach that parent.
Yes, it's a team. Because, yeah, like I said, a lot of times as foster parents, we feel inadequate, incompetent. We're not doing enough. And so when the foster kids caseworker says, you're doing a great job, that could even speak more volumes than the licensing worker. That could even speak more volumes than the therapist. So just sometimes it's those subtle things that we say, that we do, that they feel supported, because again, if you don't have foster homes, like you said, they're like golden apples. Even with you, you sound like a dime a dozen, somebody that could stay with the kid for a long period of time, because we know that burnout and transitioning is a high thing in a lot of agencies. It's needed. And so that's why we're having this conversation. And in fact, that leads me into the next part of our programming efforts here at
And it can also increase jobs, because we have a lot of
Yes.
BSWs that maybe not want to do like traditional case management. So that's just another tidbit there.
So to kind of expound on that, it's like I don't like to say I found social work. I like to say social work found me. So I was doing a lot of social worky stuff in the church and in my community and as a foster parent before I even really knew fully what a social worker can do and what they are. So when I like to say a social worker saved my life because I was LPC track and she's like, oh no, come to social work. Tracy Nielsen, shout out. And so I was like, okay. And then I was like, it made sense. And I liked it because it was such a, we're change agents, person environment. We're not just doing therapy. We're not just engaging with the one person. We're looking at the whole system. We have a systems perspective. And that's why I think this message is important for social workers. So we come together, we problem solve. What does this look like? How do we engage? Because again, foster parents sometimes don't know. And so having that extra support helps. So with that being said, before I was even in school to get my bachelor's degree, we didn't have enough respite providers. And I saw that Missouri Lions was not, in my opinion and judgment, doing their due diligence to train up respite providers or foster parents in the Joplin area. Who suffered? The foster kids in my area and me, the foster parent. So what did I do? I reached out Missouri Lions. I said, if I can get a crew of people from this church to go through the foster parent trainings to become licensed foster parents or respite providers, would you guys commute? Because when I did my training, I had to drive to Springfield every week, 10, 11 weeks, just the base part to get my license. And so I said, would you guys commute? Come down here. We'll provide lunch. You know, I'll recruit. And they're like, oh yeah, and I was like, how many do you need? They said, we need at least 10 people to really make it worth our effort. So you know what I did? I got 10 people from our church. I got 10 people from our community to come to those classes and to get licensed. And then that still wasn't enough. And I said, we don't just need licensed foster parents, we also need licensed respite providers. And it used to be where they had to go through the whole foster parent licensing training to become respite providers. And I challenged that. And I said, some people just want to do respite. It's a great introduction to become foster parents. We talked about skills-based earlier, remember? Not just knowledge and values, but skills too. So it helps also create competence in the skills on, do I really want to be a foster parent? What are the type of kids I want to work with? Do I want to just do respite or do I want to do it long-term? You know, so and this is before school. So I'm being a change agent and I'm looking at the community needs and I'm like, what can I do? What is my responsibility in my community? How can I help and serve? So they came, we got them licensed, and we started to grow. And I'm just speaking of the Missouri Lions, you know, their kids, you know, that pool and that network. Now, over the years, some have come and gone, and there's been a couple new ones, you know, but as social workers, when we see the need, we want to meet it. And so we're doing everything in our power to meet it. So I encourage you, I want to challenge you to continue to be the change agent that you need. Again, this is not a bashing session, and I don't feel like anybody's here doing that, and I don't want you to hear my heart and that I am. We're here to say, what is the need? What's going on? So that kind of leads me to my next question. I would like you to raise your hand if you know of a foster parent support group that meets weekly or at least monthly here in Joplin. Say that again. Friday refill. And do you mind, Jason's going to bring you the mic, because I think it's important to know what resources are out there and what people can connect to. And so if you'll just share a little bit about what that is.
Friday Refuel is a virtual meeting that is hosted in the afternoons on Friday. It's flexible. It's really kind of it's improving over COVID. But Missouri Baptist is actually hosting it, and it is a support group for foster parents. And it's not just for our licensed homes, it's for anybody. Fostering Hope here locally also has a plethora of outlets to get plugged in for foster parents to be connected with other foster parents, because really they're the ones that rely on each other the most. And so Fostering Hope is a great resource. Christ Church of Oronogo also has a lot of great ways of supporting foster parents to help them get connected and build their also like family of foster parents. So those are just a couple of outreach programs that we do a lot of referrals for with our foster parents.
And with that, with the Friday refill or refuel?
Yes, Refuel.
With the Friday refuel, is that just our area or is that statewide?
So we've just it's just getting implemented in this local area. It's not something that I don't know of anything outside of the Jasper, Newton, McDonald County areas. I know that's just for the Southwest Missouri area, but I think it's a pilot program that our agency is doing here to see how much foster parents really want to use it and collaborate and see a benefit to it. And then our agency that has foster homes across the state will likely benefit from it as well.
Yeah, and I think, and thank you for sharing, and that's so important because I did not know of that. Did anybody know of that resource? So that's so important to know how to connect people to those resources so we build up that community support. And I like the idea that it's virtual and that it's accessible. It's available for those that can't commute or don't have the gas or can't take out 2 hours to commute, that they can do it from the comfort of their home. They can do it on their phone or computer. So the virtual component is a huge perk, and it has probably a lot of pros, and we need more stuff like that. And I've heard of Fostering Hope. They're a great agency too. They've done teen events. Christina's part of it, and they have a caring closet. So yeah, connecting foster families to those resources is so important. Will you hand that?
They also do foster parent night out also, and it's they have a limited amount of kids that can go to that, so foster parents can have a night out. It's usually hosted at Christ Church of Orinoco. I think you're on the board, right, of Fostering Hope, or a volunteer?
Yeah. They do new parent or new foster parent, meals, and then they do gift cards, and they do birthday cards, and the parents' night out is once a month, I believe. And the kids come and they make a craft, and the parents get to go out. I think it's 3 or 4 hours long, and so.
And is it all ages for those foster kids?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. So, see, and that's another one that is to be mindful of. I'm wondering if those organizations also have flyers that we could pass out. If we can post those flyers at Ozark Center or CASA, or email the flyers or the information. I know there's email chains that sometimes Children's Division does. Your agency probably does. But it's a lot of times bringing that awareness, so in that way you're not feeling helpless. Because that's the whole point, is that we're finding what's out there to connect them. I think at one point, Missouri Alliance was even trying to do a mentorship program with new foster parents and veteran foster parents, and how to, have meetings and conversations to build that. I love pilot programs. It's a great opportunity to explore the interest, the need, the help, the effectiveness, the satisfactory. And a lot of times foster parents are just not aware. And then as also social workers, we need to be aware and building up that toolkit of our community resources. So that was such valid information and sharing that, and thank you. And I'm relieved to know that there's something. And I know there's been other programs and other groups in the past, and sometimes it's kind of hit or miss, or there's just not a lot of buy-in from foster parents. So knowing what's out there and connecting is vitally important. Okay. So we're nearing the end of our time together. Time flies when we're having fun. So on top of that, in conclusion, it's all these things. We've learned a lot. There's knowledge, experiential knowledge. We're gleaning from each other, learning from each other, what's out there, faces, networking, programs, starting it up. Be that change agent. If it's foster parents want an in-person support group, what does that look like? How do we build a committee? Can the virtual one also do the in-person one? Are there mentorship programs? But basically, when we're empowering the foster parents, we're empowering the foster children. And that is the ideal living environment for foster kids, because residential and group homes often create institutionalized kids. So we want to provide premium care, premium services for kids as much as possible, as much as social workers. So as we're near the end, let's just open it up for any other further insights, community resources, or anybody have questions about anything that we had shared or discussed? Going once, going twice. Oh, yep.
Hi, I'm a bachelor social worker student, and I work in the school at my hometown in Monette, and I'm a teacher's aide. And this kid comes up to me, and he's just talking about his home life and stuff, and he just comes up and he's like, I don't like being a foster kid. So what would you say to that? like, I felt so bad. I was like, I'm sorry, but then he left because his name got called out. So,
Yeah.
like, what would you even like say to that?
Well, first of all, thank you for being a BSW student and completing that degree, because we need a lot of social workers, especially in the rural communities. I would think Monette, you said, is probably more of a rural community, and a lot of times those needs even go more unmet because there's less services in that. So I think that first of all, or next, it's vital that he felt safe enough to share that with you. And so for you to listen, that is enough. For you just to be present, that is enough. Oh, I don't got time. Or shouldn't you be in class? Or yeah, that would suck. But sometimes just being those ears, I'm going off the deep end, but that's what they get. That's what sometimes they get from their foster families. Not right now. Or I got to text this person back. Or I'm in my show. We'll talk about it later. Sometimes they don't have just that person to be present in that moment. And so having that eye contact, listening, exhibiting those active listening skills, reflective listening skills. Thank you for sharing with me with that. And I just want you to know I'm here, and if to be as supportive as I can, and I don't know as your role as the parent aide or whatever role that is with him, you reinforce that role and to be present with him and listening. Sometimes that's just enough, because they've heard a lot of the therapy talk. They've heard a lot of the redirections. And so sometimes they just need a vent. So that's, any other feedback on that from anybody else? Yeah. So I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer when you're present and listening. And kudos to you that you would present in your school to him a safe place, a safe ear to land on and to share that, because maybe he's not shared that with anybody. Maybe you're the only person he's ever said, I don't like being a foster kid. So, okay. Miss Sarah's coming up. All right, so we'll go ahead and pass it over back to Miss Sarah. Thank you, guys, and
Thank you, David.
and appreciate it. Thank you.
That was an awesome presentation. You're truly a Jedi foster parent. And I know that firsthand because I have worked with you very closely with a couple of kids. Oh, come back. I have a gift for you. Almost forgot. Thank you very much. We have a gift for you from our committee, and best of luck with all the young men that you're influencing in a positive way. Okay, if you didn't put your name on the back, sign in, be sure and do that for CEUs. We will now take our afternoon break.